Got Senator James Lankford. Senator Lankford, welcome back to the Pat Campbell Show. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, Pat. Thank you.
I was off yesterday. I caught you on Fox and Friends and with Steve Ducey. And you were talking about, first of all, the night before, you were at a dinner with the president and a couple of other key players in the Senate when it comes to repealing and replacing Obamacare. I guess you were talking about changing some of the Senate rules. In fact, I was just sharing, before you came on here, with listeners bits and pieces of a Washington Post article about you making the case back in early February. So what were you telling the president?
Well, the president brought up the Senate rules during that conversation. We were talking a lot about health care, about what happens next after this gets passed, because there's a lot more that needs to be done. And so really a lot of that conversation was we hope to be able to get this bill in some form passed to be able to deal with the bits of repeal we can get done, start the process on replacement, and then what's next. And then he got into the issue about cloture and the 60-vote threshold and his frustration with the Senate, which stand in a long line of 200 years of people that are frustrated with Senate rules on that. My proposal has been twofold. One is on all nominations, that we should not have 30 hours of debate on nominations. Right now, the Democrats can't win any nomination votes because it's a simple majority, but they can...
Senator, can I jump in real quick? Can you back away from the receiver just a little bit? I'm getting some crackling. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can only do 3 a week on the nominations because they can demand that 30 hours of debate happens for every single one of them, even though we're going to win it, and they know it. So at this process, with the way that they're demanding 30 hours of debate for every nominee, it will literally take 11 years to be able to get the president's staff on board. 11 years to be able to go through the process, and they know it. And so they're trying to keep the president from getting his staff. So you keep hearing all these agencies can't get their work done is because we can't put staff in place. They're preventing the staff from getting there. They can't stop the vote, but they can slow it down. So I had proposed back in February that we dramatically change the rules on the time that's allowed for each. I did not win that. I have more and more of my folks from my own side that are now coming back and saying, no, we should have done that then. The other proposal I have is for every vote, legislative vote, there's actually 2 cloture votes, and most people don't know that. It's 60 votes to get on a bill and debate it, and then 60 votes to get off of it.
Explain what cloture is for those that don't know.
So there's the old filibuster rule that everyone knows in the Senate, that you believe that a filibuster means that you have to be on the floor to actually debate. That's actually not true. It takes 60 people to agree to be able to get onto a bill. That's the 3/5, and then you've got to have the same 3/5 to also agree that debate should end and we should actually vote. So the 3/5 rule is only to say we should all debate this issue, then another 3/5 saying we're done with debating. Historically, if you go back 15, 18 years ago, it was hardly ever used. And then about 15 years ago, people started demanding that we actually have a real vote. Before, it was just a common agreement. Like I've talked to Don Nichols. He said that during the time he was in appropriations from 1980 until 2004, there was never a cloture vote getting on a bill or getting off a bill for any appropriations bill that entire time. That just wasn't done at that time. Now it's common practice. It was always there, but it was never done. So what I proposed is doing away with the first of those votes. The majority should always be able to get on a bill, and then if you can't agree on getting off of it, that's the problem. You just keep debating it until you solve it. But the majority should always be able to get on it. Most of the issues we're facing right now, we can't even get on the bill to debate it.
All right, again, we're talking with Senator James Lankford about repealing Obamacare. Now, when I saw you on Fox and Friends with Steve Ducey yesterday, you said in order to get a clean repeal, you need 60 votes, and you said clearly you guys don't have 60 votes. In fact, right. you can't even count on 51. Let me ask the question here, because this is what I get from the listeners. They say, why won't they use the nuclear option? And explain what the nuclear option is and whether or not it's applicable to this.
Yeah, it is actually. The nuclear option is also called the constitutional option. The rules, the Constitution states that the Senate creates its own rules. Okay. So in the past, the Senate has created a rule that 3/5 is this issue about cloture. So you've got to have this 60 votes for us because we have 100 senators. To change the rule, it takes 67 to change a rule. That is the rules of the Senate. But because the Senate constitutionally can change the rules as it chooses to, you could say 51 and then just say with 51 simple majority, we just flat out change the rules. That's called the nuclear option because that is really violating the rules of the Senate to change the rules of the Senate. But is it technically possible? Yes, but it sets a new precedent. The fear of it is long-term Republicans blocked card check for unions. They blocked cap and trade. They blocked a lot of bad policy by using the 60 vote as well. So once you flip it to 51, the Senate and the House basically function the same, and Democrats will have a lot more control historically of the Senate than Republicans have had, and they're going to run through a lot of bad legislation.
Let me ask you this. Can you exercise the nuclear option now to repeal Obamacare and then change the rule back where they need a supermajority?
Yep. You cannot. Because once you set that precedent is set.
Okay.
So it's the same as when Harry Reid used the nuclear option to change the nomination rule. They didn't have 67. They had 51 to change it, but it is forever changed. It's a new precedent in the Senate, and so it will always be 51 now for that. So once you change it, you can't change it back unless somebody for some reason said they wanted to be able to limit themselves. And I can't imagine anyone in majority would ever say, "Nah, we want to limit ourselves now."
So why not use it?
Because of the permanent change in the Senate and what happens in the days ahead when you want to be able to have a real debate. The Senate, as philosophical as this is, the Senate is the only place in the federal government where the minority voice is always heard. Okay. Always.
So you also made the case with you also made the case with Ducey that you can bit piece repeal not all, but perhaps the most offensive parts of Obamacare. Explain how that will work and what kind of votes you need.
So that's the reconciliation bill we're working through right now. Okay. Through the budget process, you can actually take care of a lot of it that's budget-related and tax-related. You can't deal with a lot of the policy stuff because it's a budget bill. Okay. Reconciliation bill only allows you to deal with budget items. That's the fight when everyone says we're fighting with the parliamentarian. Right. Why don't we just do it? Because it's the law. The 1974 Budget Act is not a Senate rule. That's actually the law. Okay. So it would take a change in the House, Senate, and White House to be able to change that Budget Act. Again, that's a 60-vote piece to be able to do that as well.
Explain give me some specifics. What parts you could repeal? What funding mechanisms you could repeal?
All right, so let me give you an easy example on it. The individual mandate and the employer mandate. Some of the most offensive parts of Obamacare are those two mandates. We can take the penalties out on those mandates, but we can't take the policy of the mandates out. But it basically neuters them. But the policy would still say you have to be able to buy insurance, but there's no penalties anymore. So we can take the budget part of it out, but we can't take the policy part of it out. Now, at the end of the day, is everyone going to say, with no penalties, it's gone away? Yes. And then our hope is in the days ahead to be able to get a bill through, and we'll put into that bill to be able to take the rest of the text out. But it efficiently neuters the individual mandate, employer mandate, but in statute, they're still there.
So what was the sticking point? Why couldn't Mitch McConnell get something through? What was the hang-up?
I think part of it is process. People want to be able to work out the final details of it. Part of it is some people have a problem with the way the changes are happening in Medicaid. Some people think the Medicaid changes aren't far enough. Some people think that we need to deal with more rural hospitals. So everybody's got a different issue. My focus for a while has been, why don't we get everyone who has a different issue in the same room at the same time, and let's hammer this out, rather than it's a constantly changing bill, and as soon as you change one thing, another group doesn't like it all of a sudden. This can be resolved with a group of adults by all just sitting down together and hammering it all out.
So is the recess still postponed? What happens?
Yeah, the recess is still postponed. My focus has been we should not take an August recess until we get this resolved. But at the end of the day, we've got to be able to get not only nominations done, we've got to be able to find a way to apply pressure to Democrats to allow us to be able to move on time on these nominations. We've got to get the health care bill done. We've got to set up appropriations. We've got tax reform to set up. There are a lot of big issues, and we've been just piddling, all debating on this health care piece. We've got to be able to get this resolved and get moving. And I can't imagine a scenario where we don't get this resolved.
One more real quick here. I played a clip from Byron York earlier in the show this morning where he said it's pretty clear that there's certain members of the GOP in the House and the Senate that don't want to repeal Obamacare. Is he right or is he wrong?
I think there are members that don't want to repeal parts of Obamacare. I think that's actually true. That there are some folks that said we should repeal Obamacare that really meant, no, we should repeal a few parts of Obamacare. So we're trying to deal with that reality right now when you still have to get 51 votes. As I've tried to inform Oklahomans, not every Republican in the country thinks like Oklahoma Republicans do. They think very different. They're still in our party. They're still a part of making us a majority, but they don't think about things the same way that we do.
Yeah, you mentioned real quick here too that insurance rates for the exchange in Oklahoma went up 76% last year.
76%
That's
last
insane.
year.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is insane. And Chuck Schumer is trying to go out and say that Donald Trump is trying to sink Obamacare and that he's making it worse. It wasn't bad, but he's trying to make it bad based on the policies he's put in place. That's absurd because when we had a 76% rate increase last year, that wasn't with Donald Trump as president. That was with President Obama doing everything he can to protect it.
Senator James Lankford, we thank you.
You bet. Thanks.